All right, welcome back, people. My name is Dave. This is the Radical Independent today. I've got two very special guests with us to discuss a really important topic as we celebrate the 21st birthday of the Patriot Act. I guess the Patriot Act can now consume adult beverages in most states. We've got James Roguski with us. James, of course, you know from other broadcasts that I've had him on. He's obviously a researcher, he's an author, he's an activist, and he likes to stay up really late at night doing research. And we've also got Janet Phelan with us. Janet has been on the trail of the biological weapons agenda since the new millennium. So she's way ahead of pretty much everybody. She has a new book out. It's called At the Breaking Point of History: How Decades of U.S. Duplicity Enabled the Pandemic. It's published by Trine Day, came out last year, and it's available on Amazon and pretty much everywhere else. Her articles have also appeared in the Activist Post, the New Eastern Outlook, InfoWars, oh no, and elsewhere. I love InfoWars. Educated at Grinnell College, UC Berkeley, and the University of Missouri Graduate School of Journalism. Janet jumped ship since 2004 and has been writing exclusively for independent media. That's fantastic. Her articles previously appeared in the LA Times, We Magazine, Orange Coast Magazine, the Long Beach Press Telegram, the Santa Monica Daily Press, and other publications. Janet, how are you today?
I'm fine, thank you.
Yeah, I ran out of air, so I had to stop. James Roguski, what's going on? I'm the only guy on the internet that can pronounce your last name properly, so I need extra special attention here today.
All right, well, I'm going to dive right into it. We're not going to sing. We're not going to sing "Happy Birthday" just yet, but I'm going to dive right into it and give most of the time here to Janet because she's been doing this for quite some time.
All right.
Hey, everybody. 21 years ago, on October 26th, 2001, the Patriot Act became a thing. And, most people don't know the acronym, and I can't remember it. I have to read it. Uniting and Strengthening America, USA, by providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism act, Patriot Act. Okay. And part of it is, did it protect us from terrorism and biological warfare, or did it set the stage for the situation that we're in right now? And so all I want to do is raise some unanswerable questions, quite frankly. And this all started because Janet called me up, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago now, and we were talking about some things and digging into literally the Patriot Act, which I'm going to pull up right now. And so the first point is, hopefully you can see, this is page 116 of the Patriot Act, and it's section 175B. And David, I love to read boring, documents and find interesting things. And Janet called me up and said, "Hey, Jim, I got a boring document I want you to read, but it's actually kind of interesting." Page 116, section 175B, a restricted person, right? A restricted person shall not transport bioweapons, basically, right? Well, that sounds like a good thing. You don't want somebody who's under indictment for a crime, or has been convicted of a crime, or is a fugitive from justice, or is an unlawful user of a controlled substance, or is a quote unquote illegal alien, or has some mental issues, or is working for a foreign government, has been dishonorably discharged from the army, or is working for a terrorist organization. That all seems to make sense until you get down here a little bit lower, and I will actually go to the code, because that was the act, and it all got worked into the U.S. code, right? And there's this interesting line here for the penalty if you do these bad things, meaning dealing with biological agents or toxins, right? Whoever violates this section shall be fined not more than 10 years, but the prohibition contained in this section shall not apply to any duly authorized United States governmental activity. Now, when I read that, it seems like they just opened up the door really, really wide for the US government to use restricted people, and they can't be penalized. Now, I'm just going to leave that question hanging because I got more rhetorical questions, right? On September 14th, the Lancet Commission on COVID-19 made a recommendation, okay? They said the WHO should be given new oversight authority regarding the biosafety, biosecurity, and biorisk management of national and international research programs that are engaged, and I'll go back up here to the top of the page, in the collection, testing, and genetic manipulation of potentially dangerous pathogens. Oh, so they want the WHO to regulate, in my interpretation, what could be considered by many to be gain of function, dual use research of concern, or DIRC, or some would say bioweapons work, okay? The WHO and Switzerland launched a global biohub for pathogen storage, sharing, and analysis, and also distribution. They say in the article, they want all of the nations around the world to send them their pathogens, and then they'll culture them and send them out to all the other biolabs. You know, pardon me for asking, but why is the Lancet advocating for the WHO to be put in charge of this? Why are they setting up a biosystem? And in my opinion, you know, shouldn't gain of function just be shut down? I mean, it's biological warfare. And so Janet pointed me to some really boring documents, and there's some really interesting stuff in the middle of it. And I can't hold a candle to what she's going to tell you. She's been deep in the middle of this for quite some time. It's all yours, Janet.
Well, thank you for the wonderful intro, Jim. As we know, the Patriot Act was passed in the wake of the attacks of September 11, 2001, and also in the wake of the anthrax attacks. And I believe that it is no coincidence that the anthrax attacks were paired with the attacks on the World Trade Center. A lot of attention has been given in the media to the surveillance capabilities that and mandates that were lodged in the Patriot Act. The NSA can now spy on us, they can do this, they can do that. People are kind of upset about that, but almost no attention whatsoever was given to the implications of Section 817 and that bizarre caveat that the prohibitions contained in this section shall not apply to any duly authorized U.S. governmental activity. And I'd like to take a moment and try to deconstruct that statement. So essentially, what this 175B, which is what 817 ended up being translated into in public law, is stating that terrorists and mentally ill and criminally insane and so forth can indeed possess and transport biological weapons if the U.S. says it's okay. So besides opening the door to deplorables, real true deplorables, being able to have access to these weapons, what does this actually say about the rest of us? So it doesn't say anything about other people. It doesn't say that normal people are restricted. It says that the criminally insane and terrorists are restricted, but it doesn't say anything about the rest of us. So it almost seems as if this strange little section is opening the door to permitting everybody to possess and transport biological weapons if the U.S. tells them it's okay. Now, that's a strange little animal there. And if you look at the Biological Weapons Convention, which is the international treaty which allegedly governs biological weapons activities among the member states, prohibits them, actually, it could be seen, this section in the Patriot Act could be seen as a direct violation of the Biological Weapons Convention. And so with this concern in mind, I traveled to Geneva, Switzerland, to participate in the Biological Weapons Convention twice, once in 2011 and again in 2016. And while I was there, I was able to determine that the US had violated the convention in a sort of a bureaucratic way by failing to report this section to the convention at large. Under the mandates of the treaty, every sort of change in biological weapons activity, including legislation, has to be reported to the convention at large. So I was told by State Department employee and convention delegate Chris Park that, oh, good golly, it was an oversight, we forgot. So sorry, we forgot, which appears to be belied by later activity by the US. Specifically, in a side event during the lunch hour, the US was making a presentation to the convention delegates on what kick-ass legislation, domestic legislation the US had about biological weapons. And they brought onto the screen 175. What we're talking about now, this prohibition contained in this section, verbiage is in 175B. So the presentation was made by Dr. Daniel Gerstein. He showed did a PowerPoint presentation. On the screen, he put 175, no mention of prohibitions contained in this section shall not apply to any duly authorized US governmental activity, which appears to be the radioactive issue. So my hand went up and I asked Dr. Gerstein about his omission. He appeared mightily confused and said he'd have to check into this. I also asked him, because at that point in time, I was doing some research on possible storage facilities for these sorts of illegal weapons. And I had gotten some information that these weapons were possibly stored at Sierra Army Depot, which is a military base in Northern California. And I brought this up to Dr. Gerstein, and in front of the entire room full of delegates, he denied that Sierra Army Depot even exists. So, and please do Google this. Sierra Army Depot is in Northern California. It's been there for decades. So at that point in time, I became concerned about the integrity and honesty of the United States in terms of its relationship with this international treaty. And I just want to say one more thing about this treaty, because it's a very strange duck indeed. The Biological Weapons Convention is very possibly the only international arms treaty that has no verification mechanism and no way to deal with violations of the treaty. It's a beautiful document, well written, with gaping holes should there be any violations. So this treaty came into existence in the mid-1970s, and in 2001 there was an attempt to create this verification mechanism so it wouldn't be a complete waste of time. Okay, waste of paper, waste of time. Nothing you can do about any reported violations. So in 2001, an ad hoc committee put together a proposal for a verification mechanism. It was presented to the convention at large and was boycotted by the United States team under the the reign of then UN Ambassador John Bolton, the entire US team got up and walked out of the meeting, thereby boycotting the verification protocol. And as we know, within about 6 months, the anthrax attacks took place, which, should there have been a verification protocol, might have been more effectively dealt with than it was by the Keystone Cops caper that the FBI initiated as a result of the anthrax attacks. So I'm going to take a moment here. David, do you have any?
Yeah, if I may, David,
actually,
I'd like
James,
to,
go ahead, James.
I'll share my screen again just to show how. Hopefully, you can see Section 175B. This is just the U.S. code from the government website, and it's 175B is what we're talking about, and so it's very easy. People get confused. I just hit the previous button. This is 175A. I hit the previous button again, and what Google usually brings you to is Section 175, and there is a subsection B down here. And so people get confused. When you say 175B, you would think that we're talking about this section here. But you just hit next to go to 175A, and next again to 175B, and this is where the penalty is wiped out for restricted people, restricted persons, okay? And so people get confused because it's hidden in plain sight, but finding it, if you don't just know how that whole thing is structured, people point and they go, oh, well, you're crazy. Look over here. No, look over there. Okay. And that's how, a vast amount of this deception is accomplished. The information's right there, but they just get you looking at something else. So, David, I'm sure you're a fan of Mr. Bolton, and I don't know what other questions you might have, but I'll give the floor back to you and Janet.
When Janet said John Bolton, I had a little episode here that you guys didn't see off camera, but what I'm really concerned about is what we can all do about this. What is the action point here? I know we present some really interesting information. You guys are doing great research, but what can we do? What can the average citizen do? When I say average citizen, James and Janet, I'm talking about somebody who's trying to fight through the inflation, the soaring gas prices, the culture war, worrying about what their kids are learning at the elementary school and things like that. I mean, there's so many issues on the table. And I put this video out and people are going to go, okay, how can I stop what appears to be the Patriot Act on steroids and allowing people who shouldn't be handling biological, weapons or substances? What can we do? I mean, that's the question I have for both of you.
I'd like to say something very briefly about that and then turn this over to James. At this point, we're way down the path. We're celebrating the 21st anniversary of the USA Patriot Act. We've now had a pandemic which has raised concern in many quarters as to the veracity of what we've been told has happened, the veracity of the sort of countermeasures we've been presented with. We're living in an increasingly a dystopian science fiction novel, which unfortunately is now playing out on planet Earth. And it appears to me and to many others that one of the best interventions we can make at this point in time, if possible, is to try to address this WHO effort to put all the eggs in the WHO basket to create a pandemic treaty, which all the nations of the world will have to obey as if it's domestic law, and will put us under a situation where we have no individual health sovereignty and no national health sovereignty. And I know that Jim has some ideas about stopping the WHO, and so I'd like to hear from him now.
Go ahead, Jim. James, did we lose James? James, I think you're on mute still.
Muted myself out.
There you go.
There's a number of things that I'm going to share here, and again, I'll share my screen. In the international health regulations, on page 69 in the PDF, but I believe it's page 61 in their document, when these IHRs, as they're called, international health regulations, were adopted, nearly 20 years ago, a little bit after the Patriot Act. Okay, the United States put forth what's called a reservation. And essentially what it said is, yeah. You got all these nice regulations, but it is the United States understanding, I'll highlight it here, that any notification that they might be obligated to give, if it would undermine the ability of the U.S. armed forces to operate effectively in pursuit of U.S. national security interests, it wouldn't be considered practical. Okay, well, what that means is take your laws and apply them to somebody else, because if our military wants to do something, we're going to do it anyways. And very specifically, what those notifications were is that if we learned of a leak or some kind of a biological problem outside of the United States, the military, we would have to report it. And so this gets into a little bit of a brain bender, but then you start looking at how all of this biological research was temporarily, banned in the United States, and then they offshored all of this work to the Wuhan lab. Okay, and I'm going to pull up another page here in just a moment. A number of months ago, I wrote an article that was kind of hot and heavy in the news back in February. Just give me a moment to dig down into it here. This has been in the news and many people are aware, but the United States Department of Defense has funded and operated biological labs in the Ukraine. Quite frankly, from my point of view, this is old news. This is from March 11th, and they've been doing it for decades. The way they've structured the law is that, let's offshore it. Let's get the Department of Defense to do biological research. Why is the Department of Defense doing gain-of-function biological research in other countries? Okay, I will just leave that as a rhetorical question, David. Okay, because we could be here for months, right? Why in the world are we doing the things that we are clearly doing? What is the benefit of researching this? Now, my answer to what the average person can do is wake up, do some learning, understand that the Patriot Act, has been around for 21 years. You maybe could have, should have read it. Take the time to pull it up. It's still out there. It's a PDF. Read it. It'll hurt your brain. But when you go to page 116 and you see that criminals and illegal aliens and terrorists and so forth, they get a pass. If the government hires them to move along biological weapons, no problem. Okay. And if something happens in an overseas lab, we don't have to report it. If it was happening in one of our labs in our country, we'd be obligated to report it. Okay. You see how the game is structured, how the laws are structured so that the players get off scot-free, while you have to be patriotic and let them spy on you. So happy birthday to the Patriot Act. It's 21 years. Janet, we'll give you certainly the final word. You know so much about this. You've been digging into this for quite some time. Please go right ahead.
Yes, well, there were a lot of other actions taken in the legal sphere following the attacks of September 11th, which ended up creating a clear path for the US to go ahead to do this sort of gain of function biological research. We say gain of function, but what we're really talking about is developing weapons, and which also enabled the fact that we were visited with this pandemic. And I do understand that this was only the first and that there are going to be more. So for all of us who care about our health, who care about our families, who care about our rights to administer the kinds of countermeasures that we decide are appropriate should we get ill, I really urge everyone to take a look at the pandemic treaty, take a look at what Jim Roguski is proposing as our basis for contacting our elected representatives and voicing our concern about this. We have to do something now, because if we don't, and if this pandemic treaty is passed, we will be under the thumb of a global system for which there will be really no redress. So that's what I want to say. And thank you very much, David, for having us both on the air. Thank you so much, Jim, for your time and for setting this up.
Yeah, thanks to both of you guys. Just great information, great research. And again, just to echo, and then I'll wrap up here. Call your politicians, call the local politicians, call your senator. My senator is running cover for Victoria Nuland, so I don't know how much good that's going to do, but you can vote for somebody else. Do some research like Janet and Jim both suggested. That's the best thing we can do, is get more educated so we can tell other people and then hopefully make an impact and change things before, as Janet said, it gets to the point where somebody far away from your country is telling you what you can and cannot do with your own body when it comes to your health. All right. On that note, I'm going to wrap things up. Again, I want to thank Janet and Jim for being here, and I'll see you soon, everybody. Thanks for watching.